Welcome to our show. Happy New Year. It's nice to see all of you again online. It's nice to see you, Rosanna, you, Eric, and you also, Scott. We will also be joined later on in the show for a sports segment by a contributor from Philadelphia, a big Eagles fan, but we'll be talking about the Broncos today. Today marks 90 days since October 7th, when the war on Gaza began after Hamas and other armed groups went into the Gaza envelope and attacked kibbutzim. Then we will also be talking about Harvard President Claudine Gay, how she recently resigned. And then again, we'll be talking about the Broncos at the end of the show, followed by our mailbag. The first segment that we have today is going to be on Gaza. So 90 days is quite a long time. And during that time, we've seen 22,185 or more Palestinians in Gaza who have been killed, including several hundred in the West Bank. We've seen 1.9 million Palestinians in Gaza displaced. There are 2.2 million Palestinians in Gaza. So that means that, over 90% basically of all Palestinians living in Gaza have been displaced. Many of them have been displaced more than once. The Israeli military is telling people to evacuate, and then they're telling them to evacuate again, and then they're telling them to go live in tents, and then they're bombing tents. There are very few hospitals and clinics left operational. There are no schools left operational. It's been a total brutal massacre, genocidal massacre. 65,000 houses have been demolished. The water has been shut off. Israel has been pumping seawater into the ground in Gaza, ostensibly to try and flood tunnels, but also as a genocidal side effect is basically salting the earth that way. It's been a really, really terrible, challenging time for Palestinians, for people who care about Palestinians, and for people who care about liberation all over the world. But it's been 90 days. And there's been a ton of fight back during that time. I can speak from experience. I've never seen this kind of intense fight back in the streets of the United States. All over the world, people have shut down capitals. They've launched new boycotts. They've called into their Congress people, their political leadership. They've made demands. They've shut down bridges. But I kind of wanted to start off today's show asking the panel, it's been 90 days. We've been calling for a ceasefire now for 90 days. And so I just sort of wanted to check in and see where we're at with that demand. Eric, what do you think? Has this been
I,
working? Do we need to be doing something new?
I think it's working, and I don't think that we need to be doing anything new. I think we need to stay focused, and I think we need to understand how long it takes to win change at the level that we're trying to win it. There is extremely broad resistance to support for Israel. Reuters reports that three-quarters of Democrats and a half of all Republicans support a ceasefire. That's a vast majority of the country supporting the ceasefire. So the battle for the hearts and the minds of working people in this country has been won, I believe. Now it's how do we organize ourselves and keep this up so until we can force the change that we need to see, which is Biden has to pick up the phone and call and say, this has to end. We need a ceasefire today. Um, I also just want to mention that over 1,000 black clergy signed an open letter to Biden uh, demanding a ceasefire or expressing their support for a ceasefire. That is a key constituency for Biden and many key constituencies for Biden: youth, African American, um, uh, migrant, other constituencies that he's going to need if he wants to win in 2024 are standing against his support for Israel, and that is the type of expression and the type of level of organization that will eventually, I believe, win a ceasefire.
Yeah, for sure. Um, you know, I think a lot of younger people who are, maybe this is their first or second time responding to this sort of genocidal massacre that's happening in Gaza, although the scale of this is off the charts. It's unprecedented in my lifetime. Um, a lot of young people who are running into this reality, basically, who are saying, yeah, we've been calling our congress people, we've been out in the streets, and yes, it is, as Eric says, the black clergy, the African American community, the Muslim American community, the Arab American community are really key for Biden to win re-election. Why is it, though, that he just seems to be brushing them off? It doesn't seem like anybody any key constituency, even his own staff, are resigning now. We had a second person, the first Palestinian American, who resigned from the Department of Education. All of this pressure doesn't seem, on its face, maybe, to be yielding any results. Rosanna, what would you say to somebody who is getting really, really frustrated with this, who is saying it doesn't matter what we do, this is hopeless? What's the point in calling my congressperson for the 11th or the 50th time if they just don't seem to be listening to us?
Well, it's understandable that we can lose our patience, because the urgency of ending the war is so great. We hear of the killings of children, of women, of anybody, the bombing of hospitals, and we feel this urgency to bring about change. But we have to remember that change is a process, and it's winnable because we have the majority to do that. And what we have to do is be as steadfast as the right wing capitalists and imperialists that are fighting against us. Also, I think that we need to remind yourself that historically, where it maybe have seemed impossible to win a battle, it has been won. I mean, take a look at the example of Vietnam. Other
Right.
countries, the fight against apartheid,
Mm-hmm.
uh, all of those kinds of struggles tell us and gives us that strength to know that it is a winnable fight. It's just not going to happen like it happens on TV, a 30-minute, 40-minute, 1 hour kind of show. But it will happen. But what we have to do is stay focused, continue the pressure, because we do see indications of change. We do see indications of increased pressure against, to end the war, and then this whole South Africa taking them to court. All of those are indications that change is happening. That our efforts are worth continuing, and there is change happening. We just have to be patient, but continue. Don't give up, because that's the thing that they would love for us to do, is to just
Mm-hmm.
give up. Just like in voting, they make it like, your vote doesn't count. They tell you all this propaganda so that you don't vote, but in reality, they're telling you because your vote does really count. So we have to think about it very, very all around, instead of just you know just only taking into account our emotions, because people are counting on us to not give up. If we really care about the people of Palestine, we cannot give up. We have to continue and be strong and be just focused, and just keep at it and keep at it and keep at it, and increase our pressure. That's it.
Right. Yeah, no, 100%. I hear you. Whenever I get feeling hopeless, and it's easy to do, especially when you're looking at this massacre unfolding in real time all day on social media, on the news, from your friends or your family, if you have them over there. Whenever I feel hopeless, I think about how the Palestinians themselves are a very good kind of case study in patience, right? Like, nobody has been more patient than the Palestinians for the last 75 years when it comes to their liberation. And as horrific as these losses are right now in Gaza, you can be sure that they're not going to give up, right? They're not going to give up until the occupation is ended and until, they have liberation. And so I think it's important, to take leadership from that, and to hold hope close to our hearts, and to keep up the fight, because again, we should be taking example from them, from their patience, from their steadfastness, and from their unwillingness to give up the fight and go home. or not go home, excuse me, to give up. Basically, they are home. But there have been some good things that have happened too, Scott. Like Rosanna just mentioned that the South African government has taken the Israelis to the International Court of Justice, where I guess Alan Dershowitz might be helping to defend them. We also have seen that, for instance, at the beginning of this year, there was some talk in the media about how Biden had sort of given the Israelis a deadline up to the end of 2023. And sure enough, even though the Israelis went ahead and bombed Beirut in order to assassinate a leader of Hamas there, even though you've seen these terrorist attacks that have unfolded in Iran, killing hundreds of people at a memorial for General Soleimani, who was killed under the Trump administration in 2019. I'd like to remind people that there's been some progress. So what have you seen that might give you reason to hope that things are going in the right direction?
Well, first of all, the Biden administration is obviously kind of in the hot seat. They don't want this war. They are thus far unwilling to, countenance a demand for a ceasefire, but they've been increasingly vocal about, in their criticism of, of Israel's tactics in Gaza. I mean, too little, obviously, and far too late, but it shows that they're trying to get Israel to just bring it down a notch in hopes that that will encourage people to pack up and go home, like Rosanna was saying. That's not going to happen. It's also a positive development. Maybe, to my mind, the most positive development in this is that, on the heels of its huge strike victory here in the United States, the UAW issued a call for an immediate and permanent ceasefire and announced that it was looking into cutting its ties with war profiteers. So as Marxists, we know that the working class is working class struggle is the dynamism that can create social change. And the fact that one of the most powerful unions in the country has come out and said that publicly is a very, very good sign. That's another of these key constituencies, obviously, for Biden. But it also points to a huge development in the country. For a long time, we've been kind of inundated with the message that foreign policy is above our pay grade, as normal people. That's something for experts, for, think tanks, for people that have, spent years in politics or corporate life or whatever. And now, we're seeing that for the lie that it is. And what we're struggling with is people's hearts and minds are won to the ceasefire, and now we're struggling to win their feet to it, right? To get people to realize that they do hold the power to change foreign policy, that it is their right in a democracy to have a say in the foreign policy of their country and whether or not it's providing arms for genocide. So that is the fight we're winning, and winning this ceasefire is going to unlock huge developments in peace and anti-imperialist struggles all over the place. The movement that's being built around this is going to create enormous change.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I have often said that Palestine is the key that unlocks many doors. And so, progress is happening, and earlier, Eric, you had mentioned the fact that we even see, an Israeli peace movement kind of, in its nascency emerging. I know that there was a young activist who was associated with our fraternal party in Israel who recently went to jail because he refused to sign up his name as Tal. I don't have his last name off the top of my head. I'm so sorry, but solidarity with you, comrade. And even though 1/3 of young people, because Israel does have mandatory conscription, you are required to go into the military. But about 1/3 of young people actually find a medical reason or a mental health reason to opt out of that. What this young comrade is doing, though, as part of a broader movement, there have always been soldiers who have refused to occupy Palestine and have gone to jail for it. he's sort of throwing down the gauntlet and saying, yeah, I'm not going to say that I don't want to go because of my health. I'm going to say that I'm not going to go because it is morally disgusting to me to imagine doing this sort of thing. But, Eric, I've heard a lot of criticism about the Israeli peace movement, even though it's small. I always thought of it like a tree. When you first plant a tree, you have to make sure that the wind isn't going to come and blow it over, that no one's going to step on it. It's something that you kind of have to protect and nurture, much like the Palestinian solidarity movement in the United States back in its nascency. People will say that, oh, well, they're all settlers. If they really care about Palestine, they would just go back to Europe. What's your take on that, Eric? What's your take on how young people are taking up this peace cause in Israel? Because I actually think that's something to be hopeful about as well.
I agree. I think it's something to be hopeful about. And I just want to mention Muhammad Ali because I think it's important to remember our own history here and because it is one fight. It is not two fights. And I think it's really important that we understand that. When in the period of the Vietnam War, there were people who were very brave and who stood up and said that they were not going to go. And Muhammad Ali is one of those folks. And they faced prison. Comrades also were among those that faced prison to protest an unjust war. Here, this is an unjust genocide that has been going on for 75 years. You'd have to be out of your mind to say that it started on October 7th. And I think that it's important to understand that this is that in my view, from what I'm reading from Palestinians and from folks on the ground there's a strong related struggle between the struggle for Palestinian justice, I'm going to say for peace and justice in Palestine, peace with justice in Palestine, and the anti-fascist movement in Israel. And they're very, very related. And they have the same enemies. And I think we have to see what's happening to the Palestinian people as a fascist attack and a harbinger of what could be happening here in the United States if we're not united and if we don't struggle hard. And if we don't see that the struggle around Palestine is the same struggle against the people that are attacking, for instance, Claudine Gay, and that are attacking Social Security, that are attacking that are building up our military budget. We need to move the money out of the military budget. We need to win peace. We need to stop funding genocide, and we need to celebrate the victory of the Palestinian people, hopefully in the near future.
Right, 100%. The young comrade's name, by the way, I looked it up, is Tal Mitnick. I wanted to be respectful of this 18-year-old's courage, and I hope that soon, Tal, you have many, many, many comrades with you, keeping you company, who have opted out of this genocidal campaign in Gaza. But it is, as you said, Eric, it's all interconnected. If we really want to push for a ceasefire here in the United States, then we also have to strengthen democracy. And I think what Scott was saying about labor getting involved is totally key. I think not losing hope is really important. I think staying out in the streets is key. There was actually just a meeting last night, Rosanna, which you were helping to facilitate, about an upcoming mobilization in DC on, I guess it's January 13th. Would you like to say a couple words about that before we move on the agenda?
Sure. We're asking as many comrades and actually, people all over the country to, if it's possible to go and attend this march. It's really important. I'm sorry, I don't remember all the details, but show up, be there. It's all part of the struggle.
Right. I think you can reach out to your club leaders or your district leaders if you would like to attend, and they can help you coordinate with our comrades in DC to sort of make that happen so that we can keep up that momentum while at the same time, using this sort of multi-pronged strategy to push things forward as much as we possibly can. But Eric, you had mentioned Claudine Gay, And she is actually the next topic on our agenda. Claudine Gay, the first African American, the second woman, first queer president of Harvard, resigned during this break. And lots of people said that, it's because she was a plagiarist. What do you think of that, Eric?
I disagree. I think that's a bunch of junk. Um, so, um, played number one, I don't think she was a plagiarist. I think that there were minor lapses in her notes, but that's not so uncommon, and people are usually allowed to correct them. But I don't want to get off into that because I think that is a false claim. I think that she is being attacked by the same people um, who are attacking every aspect of African American presence in our society right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I think it's important that she is gay, and I think it's important that she's black, and I think it's important that she's a woman. And she was the first to have that position and have that constellation of characteristics, and she's been under attack since day one, since before she actually accepted the position. She put it that this is a skirmish in a broader war to unravel public faith in the pillars of American society. And I think that I wouldn't put it in exactly those terms. I would put it that, not that I'm disagreeing with her, I think she's correct, but I would say that it is a skirmish in the broader war on democracy and the broader war on anti-racist trends in our society. And that and in that sense, it is a component of the broader war on fascism, um, to prevent fascism that is taking place. And that's why we as communists are concerned about Claudine Gray, because the attack on her is an anti-democratic attack, and it's an attack that is putting fear into institutions that should be independent in leading their intellectual life, and they're becoming more and more subservient to the ultra right and the ultra right's agenda, which is anti-science, anti-intellect, and anti-reality.
Right. No, you're correct 100%. The same person who was coming after Claudine Gay is the same person, Christopher Rufo, who is absolutely a fascist, who put the entire state of Florida under attack, is the one responsible for cleaning out the universities in the state of Florida, for banning books in the state of Florida. And at the very beginning of what was happening in Gaza, he said, this is going to be an opportunity for us to start to clean house for all of these woke academics and administrators who have been tarnishing what is it Trump said, the blood of America, or some fascist garbage like that. And the fact of the matter is, as I understand it, Scott, she wasn't fired for plagiarism. She was fired because there were some people on campus who decided to protest against the slaughter in Gaza. So why is it that everyone is even talking about plagiarism and not this larger issue?
So this is, to me, that's kind of the most interesting part of this story, right? So this all started when Elise Stefanik, who rose to prominence, promoting the Great Replacement theory that the Tree of Life synagogue terrorist, cited as an inspiration. Elise Stefanik, tried to make these university presidents, including Claudine Gay, put them in the position of sounding like they were advocating or giving space to calls for a genocide against Jews. So raising charges of anti-Semitism. That went nowhere. The Harvard Corporation supported her. The Harvard community supported Claudine Gay. So this right-wing troll fascist operative Rufo kept digging at the plagiarism thing, which again is crap. Yes, she may have repeated fragments of language from other scholars without rigorously footnoting them. But her research has never been suggested, let alone proven, that the ideas that she puts forth in her research are and belong to anybody but her. That there's anything unoriginal about her work. This is just something that, like the charge of anti-Semitism, this charge of plagiarism is something that the right has been capable of using to convince a section of people who should know better to go along with stuff like this, right? So you'll get people like, I think it was Tom Nichols in The Atlantic saying, oh yeah, obviously this was a racist hit job that demanded her resignation, but on the other hand, she did plagiarize, and that's a real thing, and she shouldn't have done that, so it's probably right that she's stepping down, right? So you get these people who claim to be, right, against fascism, who claim to be against Trump, but at the thinnest possible pretext will roll over and join in the fascist attack.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. I mean, if you're going to go after Harvard for plagiarism, if you're going to go after Harvard administrators for plagiarism, I expect to see every single president, every single administrator, every single professor in the United States being subject to the most thorough scrutiny by Christopher Rufo personally as to whether or not they plagiarize. Sorry, I know Christopher Rufo will let all of his friends slide, but it is one of those things where it's like, wait a minute, you couldn't get her on the first charge. Why not get her on unpaid parking tickets? I mean, it just seemed pretty ridiculous. But Rosanna, I have to say, I was talking to some people in my life about this because it's something that's upset me greatly. I think it's a terrible, terrible precedent to set for academic freedom, for people's right to speak up, for people's right to be employed and have like a set of politics that are in no way offensive. But I had someone in my life, as soon as like last night, ask me, well, what do I care about Harvard? These are all like the rich, the elite, the bourgeoisie. I could never get to Harvard. I can't even imagine in my head what going to Harvard would look like. Why is it that we as communists in the Communist Party would care about the president of Harvard being fired? I mean, she's powerful, she's wealthy, she's obviously gonna get another job after this. She hasn't even been, as far as I know, excused from Harvard just from that one position. So why is it that we as communists, as workers who probably aren't all going to Harvard, or definitely aren't all going to Harvard, why should we care about this?
Well, I think, first of all, I think it's really important for us to remember that we have to dig deeper whenever we hear of something going on. This whole idea of plagiarism, but it's really what is the entire story. I also think that an injustice anywhere is important for us to fight against, and the significance of this is not just that it's Harvard and she's rich, it's what it represents in terms of silencing voices, in terms of continued racism, continued homophobic, all of those kinds of things that we stand firmly against anywhere in the country and in the world. So this is it. We can't isolate or separate these things based on one aspect. We have to look at the entire picture and decide and determine that the fight is important, because it doesn't just represent one aspect of it. It represents an entire fight that we're waging. And I just lost my train of thought, but I think we have to look at the entire picture. We can't just isolate it. And she represents, the attack on her represents an attack on many other people, and we have to stand up for that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, university, college is supposed to be somewhere that you go to learn lessons about being an adult. And I think personally that this attack on Claudine Gay, while it is noxious, it's sexist, it's racist, it's anti-gay, I think it's also an attack on the students, because what kind of lesson are the students taking away from this process? And I hope that the students put up a real fight back, because this is what they would have to look forward to in their professional life if people aren't going to step up and do the right thing. How freely are they going to be able to express themselves? You've already seen it in New York and other cities, students being expelled from universities, being censured by universities, being fired from their jobs. I mean, these are all young people of color from what I have seen. I have been struggling to find a case of a white man who has been fired since October 7th for speaking out, for the Palestinians. I feel like this is almost like a McCarthyite attack on the working class, on progressive sections of the working class. And so, I hope that there is a significant fight back on that. And speaking of fight back, we will be moving towards our next segment. First, I want to say thank you, Scott. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say the other reason communists should care about what's happening at Harvard is because what's behind this right-wing attack is the demand by billionaires that their donations to universities should be reflected in their control of universities. So the fight, again, the fight to say that the fact that you gave money does not mean you get to decide, that is a very communist fight to wage. And thank you, and I'll see you all later.
Yeah, Happy New Year, Scott. See you next week. Thank you. And so now we will be moving on to our next segment once Dom joins us. Hello, Dom. Welcome to Good Morning Revolution.
Thank you for having me on.
Of course. You're calling in from Philadelphia. I see the Eagles hat on here.
Go Birds, right? Go Birds. Fly, go fly.
So you actually sent in this pitch to the show. You wanted to talk about Broncos Russell Wilson basically being benched. He's the quarterback of the Broncos. Now, I admit I am not super strong on sports, so I was hoping that maybe you could start us off by giving us like a summary of basically what's happening with Russell Wilson.
Yes, cool. So Russell Wilson, he's a 9-time Pro Bowler. He went to the Super Bowl 2 times with the Seattle Seahawks, won them their first Super Bowl in franchise history, is now playing for the Denver Broncos. Within his contract with the Broncos, he has 2 clauses. One clause says that he is owed about $40 million, regardless of if he stays with the Broncos or not. He has another clause in his contract that says if he cannot pass a physical when the new NFL year starts in March, then he's owed another $40 million. The Denver Broncos in week 8, it's now going week 18, and this news broke in week 17. But in week 8, the Denver Broncos approached Russell Wilson and said, if you do not renegotiate your contract to get rid of the injury clause that would give him $40 million, we're going to bench you for the last 2 games of the regular season. Now, I think anyone with a brain would say if you want to win a football game, if you want to win football games, you're not going to bench a 9-time Pro Bowler and a quarterback, arguably one of the best quarterbacks that's ever played, who's gone to the Super Bowl twice. You're not going to bench that player if you're looking to go to playoffs and you're looking to win football games. So I think it's not lost on anyone that this is all about that $40 million that the Broncos want to save because Russell Wilson is 35 years old, and it's not unlikely that he would get injured in a football game, obviously. So they're looking to save that $40 million by benching him in the last 2 regular season games.
Wow. 35, and he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine playing football when you're 35 and not getting some sort of really intense injury. I mean, what sorts of injuries do these quarterbacks, what sorts of injuries do they subject themselves on the job?
I mean, I would say any injury that you can really, really think of. You have concussions, ACL or knee injuries, spinal injuries, shoulder injuries. Those are all really common. Neck injuries, really any injury you can think of, you can get playing, whether you're playing quarterback or not. It's NFL or football is a very injury-prone sport.
Okay, and so that's why he's making the big money.
I mean, well, Russell Wilson, he's an NFL player, so that's why he's making big money. Okay. But he's also, like I said, one of the best quarterbacks to ever play the game. So it's not unreasonable for him to be making that sort of money, and it's not unreasonable for him to have the injury clause in his contract, given that he's 35 years old. And I also want to mention that I'm happy to say that the NFLPA, which is the players union for NFL players, is looking to take legal action against the Broncos because it did violate the collective bargaining agreement that they have, and I'm happy that they're doing that. I'm proud that they're doing that, and I'm not sure if that would happen if the labor movement wasn't so strong in the United States right now. I think the NFL and the Broncos thought that they were immune from the labor movement. And obviously they don't exist in a vacuum. They're existing in the United States amongst the hot labor movement, just like every other company in the United States. And I think that they thought that they were immune, and the working class of this country made it the case that they're not.
Right. Yeah, no, I was reading this piece in Forbes earlier as I was trying to prepare for this segment because, like I said, I'm a little bit ignorant when it comes to football. And there was this sort of devil's advocate position that the author was taking where he said, well, if they're benching him because he doesn't want to give this up, then there's going to be another quarterback that's forced to go in and play. And that person is not paid as much as Russell Wilson. I have to say that it's he's got $250 million contract with the Broncos. I guess it's 7 years. And I'm wondering if the person who's going to be taking his place in the game gets paid even a portion of that. And as I was reading it, I started to hear like the really old bosses' arguments about turning workers against each other in this way. I mean, have you seen any of that in the news yourself, Dom, around this issue?
I mean, I think that that's a great angle, and I think when it comes to NFL, that sort of line of thinking is not all too prevalent. But I think that we should put that out there and make that the case, or continue to put that argument forward. That at the end of the day, it's it's like I said, Russell Wilson is a 9-time Pro Bowler, 1-time Super Bowl champion, and been to the Super Bowl twice, the first time in Seattle Seahawks franchise history, and that's why he's making the money.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that that's not deserved, to be honest with you.
Okay. Yeah, because some workers would look at sports, and they say, well, they get paid so much money. Again, it's sort of like back to the Claudine Gay thing where it's like, well, why is it? Because I've heard people say that these people aren't workers. If you get paid this massive amount of money, that you're not a worker. Why is it you think that the Communist Party should care about this issue specifically, even though he's still making the money, whether or not he's playing, whether or not he's with the Broncos? It's $250 million is a tremendous amount of money for everyone. I can't even imagine that amount of money in my mind. Why is it that the Communist Party should care about this issue?
There's 3 reasons, really. Number one is if they're doing this to people like Russell Wilson, imagine what they're doing to the everyday worker like you and I. I mean, it's not even imagined. There's lived experiences that I'm sure everyone on this panel has had or continues to have. Everyone watching the show right now can either speak to experiencing something like this, the sort of retaliation from bosses that Russell Wilson is experiencing, or they've experienced it themselves or know someone who's experienced it. The second thing is that, like I said, that they approached Russell Wilson in week 8. This news came out in week 17. So it highlights the connection between the NFL, or the NFL has enabled teams to do these sort of things because of their connection with the sports betting industry. So for X amount for months, this information was not made public. People could have made bets because it came out off of the Broncos beating the Chiefs, which are the reigning Super Bowl champions. So they allow people to make bets on the Broncos, allow people to make bets on Russell Wilson's stats. That's working people's money that they're making bets on, and they know that they know that people are making bets on this. They're not stupid. They know that people are doing that. And the third thing is the treatment of black quarterbacks in the NFL. I think is reflective of the way black workers are treated in the United States. Russell Wilson's a black quarterback. Other instances of black quarterbacks being treated poorly by the NFL and by sports media, like Lamar Jackson and my very own Jalen Hurts. They get treated like absolute garbage by the NFL and sports media. And like I said, I think this is a reflection of the way black workers are treated in everyday workplaces.
Right. And sign Kaepernick too, while we're at it. It's
Exactly.
just, yeah. I didn't mean to take up Eric. Eric, are you a sports fan? Did you want to speak to the subject? Rosanna, are you a football Broncos fan?
Sorry, no.
No, it's okay.
I'm
Eric,
I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan, but I find it really interesting because they must have signed that contract. The NFL signed the contract with that clause, so they knew what they were doing. This is all anti-worker, basically renegotiating after they have signed the contract, and that is a very bad precedent and should not be allowed because that goes to the heart of when a union struggle happens and the unions get a contract signed. That contract must be binding on both parties because otherwise, uh, if it's just a piece of paper that you can rip up and renegotiate anytime you want, it's not uh, it's not meeting the needs of the workers, and it's not a good result for their struggles. So yeah, I totally am behind. I don't care how much this guy's making. I saw the numbers and I was like, wow. But you know what? It's nothing compared to what the top 0.01% make. And so go for it. And he's a worker, and I support him in his struggle. Absolutely.
And I think it's also important to highlight that this is all because he does not want to get hurt. You know, he
right.
doesn't want to. He's
Hmm.
35 years old. Of course, he doesn't want to get hurt. He has he's a young child. Of course, he doesn't want to get hurt. Play. Granted, it is football, and I think he knows that. But at 35 years old, he doesn't want to get hurt, and I think that that's fair. And I think that it's, like I said, reflective of some of the lived experiences that workers like you and I have. We don't want to get hurt on the job, also, and that it's reasonable to have clauses like that in our contracts.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Well, I hope that he takes them to the cleaners because God knows how many of those CEOs and executives ended up placing bets with this sort of insider knowledge. I mean, that's a whole different level. I didn't read anything about that, but that's definitely a whole different level. You should write something about that for PW, Dom, because I'm always interested in the mafia's relationship with capitalism more generally. But okay, well, thank you so much for coming on and informing us about sports. I hope we can have you on again because I think sports is like a seriously working class issue, and it's how people, a lot of people get radicalized. That's why they haven't signed Kaepernick, among other people. That's why Brittany Griner, we're so happy that she's free, but that's why it was like not as big of a deal as it was for some people. So I think sports is definitely a useful vector to reach out to our class. But stick around, Dom, because now we're going to move to the mailbag question. We've had a very long show today, but it's the new year. So this is the question that we were sent in to our mailbag. Why do y'all think that the US can make a peaceful transition to socialism? Y'all are tantamount to fantasizing that the bourgeoisie will voluntarily give up regime. Why do y'all still have such unrealistic expectations? So I would like to hand that to Rosanna first.
Well, I think all we have to do is look a little south to Mexico, and we see that the left government is in power right now, and they're having elections this year, and it looks very promising that it'll continue to be in power. And it was through the electoral process. There was, it was a peaceful transition. Clearly, it's not socialism, but it's a step towards that. It's providing needs. They're doing many uh, things that are meeting the needs of people in Mexico. The first and the president was clear that it was um, first those that are living in extreme poverty and the elderly that we have to take care of, and he started with that at the very beginning of his administration. So yes, it's not socialism, but it is a direction towards that. Um, the next president, she's a little bit more uh, leftist, and I think she's a self-identified Marxist. Anyway, so we can see that forward motion.
Mm-hmm.
True that the right is not going to give their power off just like that, but they also have to, and we've seen this once again in other parts of the world, where the right has to be very strategic. For example, even in Mexico, the president of Mexico has no bodyguards. He doesn't live in the palace. He lives in his own home. When he travels on commercial airlines, and yet we know that we know people get assassinated and stuff, but why has he not been assassinated? It's because they understand that if they do that, all the right's not going to win at all. They don't have a chance. And so we can see some of the dynamics of how the right will fight back. They have, there's an ideological battle also going on. There's infiltration of, and trying to take power through joining the Morena group, the Morena party there. And so there's attempts to doing that. There's attempts to rumors and trying to rumor mongering and all of these kinds of internal sort of ideological battles, as well as attempts by the mainstream media there, and another, waging another ideological battle. So, but people learn from experiences, continued struggle, they learn, and so they don't fall prey to many of these things, and then they see that their lives are getting better, and so all of that equation tells us that really a peaceful transition is possible. It does not going to go without some form of struggle, but it's also, we're not in the era of armed struggle anymore. It's an ideological battle. That's where the terrain, that's where we've got to fight.
Right. Well, what do you think, Eric? Do you think that it's unrealistic expectations for a peaceful transition to socialism in this country?
No, I think it's realistic because I think you have to understand what the power of the working class is. And the power of the working class is its unity in struggle, unity in action. And um, that unity to build that unity really demands a focus on democracy, which really only can flourish in a peaceful environment. So what we're talking about really is and I think that Rosanna was really clear about this. It's if there challenges to a peaceful transition will not come from the working class. Challenges to a peaceful transition will come from the bourgeois class, from the bosses and the rich people. I think it's our job as workers who somebody told me that workers were very precious. Um, it's our job as workers to protect ourselves, to acknowledge our preciousness in a society that demeans us all the time, but also to stay focused on building that unity, which is so important in going forward and building the democratic power, because there is no equivalent to the U.S. military, for instance. I mean, nobody's going to walk around with a gun and win a revolution. That's not how it's going to happen. It's going to happen because of the mass organization, the mass unity, the mass ideological struggle, and the mass organizational struggle of the working class.
Yeah. No, you and Rosanna have been spot on thus far. Dom, I want to hear what you have to say about this question.
Yeah, I agree with what Eric and Rosanna have said thus far, and I think really the struggle for socialism is already happening, and perhaps this person just hasn't been on the ground struggling with the rest of us. I don't know if they were around when millions of people took to the streets after the cops murdered George Floyd, or the mobilizations that are happening for Gaza right now. I don't know if I would call that. I think that's resistance on the capitalist class end. And if if that's too peaceful for them, I don't know what to say. I don't think that the transition for socialism is going to look like a Michael Bay movie, unfortunately, for that person, I suppose. It's happening right now, and I think that it'll continue to look like that.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that whether or not the bourgeoisie will voluntarily give up power is on the bourgeoisie, not on us as workers, you know. And I think that, as Eric was saying, our lives are precious, just like Palestinian lives are precious, right? Our lives are precious, and we owe it to ourselves as a class to do everything in our power to make sure that our lives are better because of socialism, right? I can't go to a mother of three who's got 2 jobs and say, hey, guess what? Follow us, because we're going to throw this country into chaos with armed struggle. No one's going to buy that. Workers want to live. Workers want to raise their families. Workers want to hang out and watch football. They don't want like armed struggle. You know, this is extremely obvious. And I think it's our responsibility as communists to do everything that we can to deliver for our class. And that includes making sure that we can come into power as workers through the most peaceful and democratic means possible. Now, is that something that the bourgeoisie is going to accept? That's really not my business. I'm not part of the bourgeoisie. I'm not working with the bourgeoisie, right? I'm talking to workers. I am a worker, because I think that, you know, in terms of unrealistic expectations, I can't imagine actually going up against the Pentagon and winning. So, we're being told we're getting cut by the producer because we've been on a little bit long today, but Happy New Year, everyone. It was so lovely to see all of you. Dom, thank you so much for joining us. Eric, thanks for joining us again. And until next week, stay strong, stay safe, and stay in the fight. Take care. Happy New Year, everyone.
Take care. Happy New Year.
Bye.